Hello and welcome to SYSTRAcast, the podcast from SYSTRA about all things transport, infrastructure and more. Today I'm joined by Jen Aston. She is our ecology and landscape discipline lead. So let's get straight into it. Hi, Jen.
Hi.
Great to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. So tell us a little bit about your career and exactly what your role is here at SYSTRA.
So at SYSTRA, I am the landscape and ecology discipline lead. So I lead a team of landscape architects and ecologists. My career really has been embedded with infrastructure as a landscape architect. So I started a small landscape practice, very quickly moved on to the large consultancies. But I've always worked in infrastructure, which is quite unusual for landscape architects. Lots work in residential or more environmentally based, but I've always worked on highways and rail and public realm and that sort of thing. So I've developed through and doing all reams of landscape architecture from assessment through to design.
So how did it start then? You know, school, what planted the seed, to use a terrible pun?
So interestingly, I started off as a civil engineer and ended up working for an engineering company. So I originally wanted to be an architect and then was persuaded by a careers advisor to go into engineering because I'd always have a job as a woman. So I went to uni, did my A-levels for, engineering based, went to uni, hated it, basically. Absolutely hated civil engineering. I did about 2 semesters worth and went, I'm done with soil science. So I dropped out and I actually just appeared at home one day. I didn't tell anybody. I just went home from Leeds to Birmingham and just went, I'm here, I don't like it. And then I did try another uni for civil engineering, still hated it. So then I took some time out, went back to UCAS in the book and had a look and was like, I've got these A-levels, and stumbled across landscape architecture. And that was it.
And here you are today.
And that was it.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, that's great. It really shows how you don't have to stick with something. If you feel it's not working, then change it up, explore other things.
And it was interesting because even though I was really young, I kind of, it's taught me to trust myself to make the right decision, that even though I was like 18, 19, I was like, no, I don't do this.
So tell us a little bit about your role here at SYSTRA then. I know there's never a typical day, but what does it start to look like when you get up in the morning and come into work?
So generally there's a lot of meetings in the diary. I've run landscape and ecology, and though they're linked disciplines, then they're not the same. So it's very much having 2 sides of the same team. So I also have a project role on the HS2 Main Works project, which takes up about 60% of my time. And then the rest of it is bidding, sorting the team out, winning new work, talking to the other discipline leads, lots of integration with the engineers. So it really is massively varied.
Explain to us then a little bit more about, you say there's a difference, ecology and landscape architecture. What define those for us? Maybe give us some examples to bring it to life.
So obviously my home is landscape architecture. So I completely understand the work they're doing on the projects, the landscape design that they're doing, the assessment. It's all quite design focused and mitigation focused. I have learned a lot about ecology in the last 18 months. I've only taken on the team 18 months ago. Was always aware of ecology, but never really got into the nitty-gritty of what they did. And they're very based in the protected species, very much now into biodiversity net gain. I've learned lots about surveying and the organisation of surveys for clients, etc. But yeah, so they are linked, and we try and, pull the 2 disciplines together, especially through things like biodiversity net gain. But they have very different outcomes and different targets, effectively.
And why are they both such important things for infrastructure projects? How do they fit in when we're designing and delivering rail infrastructure, for example?
So it's really important, landscape and ecology within infrastructure projects. They really need to be seen as part of the solution. It's very hard, infrastructure shouldn't be imposed upon communities. It really needs to be integrated. And the landscape and ecology really help to do that. They landscape particularly look at things like the character before, of where the infrastructure is going to be placed into. They look at the heritage, the community. And then they can start to design with that in mind. So they can design earthworks that reflect local landform. They can use species that reflect the local hedges. And they can just really integrate. And they're not a nice to have in those projects anymore. They're a real embedded part, and they can really help engineers and planners to get those projects right, and for infrastructure to really be an opportunity for environment and not environment not be a constraint for them.
And that must translate into some great benefits for the environment, but for the projects, for the clients and for the communities as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we design, we can plan that enhances carbon sequestration, that, for stormwater, we can do biodiversity and create green corridors. We can really look at transportation being part of the community. And as I said before, not imposed on it, but, we can look to enhance cycling and walking routes and create great green open spaces.
You mentioned a couple of things there, biodiversity net gain and water pollution, and they're really hot topics at the moment. There's been some changes in regulations, a lot more funding coming into the wastewater sector to deal with things like combined sewer overflows. Is that really changing the work that you and the team do? Are you having to think differently, find innovative ways to deliver these projects?
Yeah, our landscape architects have really grabbed the rainwater, stormwater garden designs. It's something we've really moved into recently in the last 6 months. And I think because we're quite a new team into that space, they're starting to bring really innovative solutions. We're not like a team that's been doing it forever and ever. They're bringing their big project experience into the smaller projects as well and really looking for those innovative solutions. And especially in like the biodiversity net gain, again, we have like really large infrastructure experience that we're now applying to smaller projects. And I think they're really bringing value to that.
The other element there that I picked up on as well, you talking about kind of collaboration across different disciplines with other engineers in the business, but also within our consultancy colleagues in the business as well, who are right at the start of planning and assessing, doing business cases for these projects. You must have a lot of interaction with them as well.
Yeah, so naturally an environment team generally sits in the consultancy side of the business rather than in engineering, but the way SYSTRA's developed with those large projects, we're sitting in engineering. But that's certainly where you would normally find the environmental professionals. And we can really, input into those feasibility studies, look at options assessment. I think that really helps. And it's important in a multidisciplinary consultancy and engineering that we have our say within the engineers as well. And I think it's quite new within SYSTRA environment. And I think we're starting to do that more now. And they're starting to realise, we have environment and let's bring them in on projects.
And is this all, it all sounds like it's making for an amazingly interesting work life. How do you go about kind of encouraging others into this industry and into this type of work? What are you telling them about the opportunities and the future of this world?
So it's really important. Landscape architecture and ecology really suffer in the recruitment world. There's basically not enough of us around. And it is the fact that you can make a difference. One of the things I went to a union to talk about was the fact infrastructure landscape architecture and infrastructure environmental work is different. And lots want to go and do what we call kind of the high glossy schemes. They want to go and design the next amazing public square and that. But actually, working in this field in infrastructure, you have a say in what your environment looks like. You're planning massive schemes. This isn't just tweaking with a bit of paving in front of a building. This is vast scale environmental work. And that's what I always try and inspire to them, because it is a difficult world to get people into, because you just don't see. When I say I'm a landscape architect that works in infrastructure, they're like, oh, you don't design gardens? Like, no, you do the trees on the side of the motorway, more things like that. And it's getting that importance of the scale of the work that we do.
But also it's almost that it's unseen work in a lot of ways, isn't it? Most of us don't pay attention to all the trees that are planted alongside the motorway or alongside a new railway line, but they are so important as part of that project, aren't they?
Yeah, they're a huge integrating factor. I mean, we'd miss them if they weren't there. If you suddenly went along a motorway and there was no trees, or, obviously rail embankments aren't quite the same, but in the wider environment, you'd really miss them if they weren't there. But you said completely, when I spent 3 years working on the M1 and everyone's like, what did you do? I was like, well, we planted like 30,000 trees. So yeah, absolutely.
And that's an ongoing benefit, isn't it? We talk a lot about sustainability and the long-term impact of the way we live our lives, the way we have to get around, the food we eat, how we get the resources that we need. And that, again, so important to have those things built in to how we plan and deliver projects from the start, so that they do continue to deliver those benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all vital that that's right at the beginning of a project. And then you can really see the benefit. And the benefit to cost ratio as well for environmental work is really what people don't see. But yeah, in terms of sustainability, if we get it right, if we design for climate change, if we design and we plant resilient species and we look at adaptability and not fragility, we can really make a difference and make it right.
Give us a couple of highlights from your career so far then, Jen. What are some standout things that you've been part of? The thing with engineers in particular, but I mean, pretty much all of our colleagues here at SYSTRA, is they're so proud of being part of projects, of giving something back, of creating a legacy. So what would your highlights be?
So I think there's one quite early in my career, and it was I was working on the town centre redevelopment, and we were trying to put a shared space in a high street, and there's lots of pluses and minuses of curb drop, not curb drop. And one of the major constraints was the blind people, and the Blind Dogs Association were really concerned that if we didn't have curb, the dogs would not be able to guide along. So we put so much effort into stakeholder engagement with them. I met them on site so many times. We set up examples, and we actually came up with a solution that still allowed us to have our shared space. But we realised things like they would stop at a double yellow line, not just a curb drop. And then we were like, well, what kind of double yellow line? So this is randomly technical, but there's thinner double yellow lines if you're in a conservation zone, and they're called primrose yellow instead of bright yellow. And we realised that the dog would stop at those. So could we use those? Could we try and look? And we ended up with a great solution. Some of it was the double yellow lines. Some of it was a different type of blister paving that just didn't quite have the whole reams of blister paving that you would see if you know. But I was really proud that we took the time, and really proud of the client as well, that they would pay to take the time to get the solution right and still achieve this shared space that they wanted.
And what a great example of working together with clients, with stakeholders, listening, challenging, adapting. That's a fantastic showcase of the sort of multidisciplinary, listening, engaging approach, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it was great. It took some persuading with the engineers that were all a bit the steadfast, we want a car because that's how we do the drainage. And that's, but, with some perseverance, we just came up with a great solution that worked for everybody in the end.
And that's, I think, I know that was a project before your time here at SYSTRA, but that's something that we see at SYSTRA, isn't it? Where different disciplines come together, we challenge each other, we're doing different projects for the same clients sometimes, so we can start to learn other challenges and other ways of thinking as well, and really bring that into all areas of our work.
Yeah, it's definitely about sharing those lessons learned. And I think that's what's really key about having multidisciplinary consultancies and engineering companies, that we can all work together. And certainly, even on the major projects like HS2, we're all learning from each other, and we're making sure what's right is put in and what's important is implemented as well.
What I was going to ask you then, what's the sort of, learning from your career so far? If you're stood in front of, a class of school children or maybe some grads thinking about where they want to go next, what's a kind of learning moment that you would pass on?
I think adaptability. I've had a really varied career. So although I've worked in infrastructure, I've done pretty much all parts of landscape architecture. And I think it's being open to every experience, being adaptable, being willing to change. And if you think something's a great idea and an engineer goes, we really can't build that, listening to them, but at the same time having conviction in your actions as well. And if you really want something, you can generally get, you can find a solution, you can work with your colleagues to try and make that work. So definitely adaptability and perseverance.
I think that's a really great point, Jen. Adaptability is so important. As you say, you've shown that through your career. You've kind of changed direction a little bit. You've explored other opportunities along the way. You've taken on the ecology work into your team now. And that's so important at SYSTRA, isn't it? We're finding a real benefit to adaptability. We have a strong pedigree in transport and delivering rail, metro and other projects like that. But into energy, into water, into the environment and into so many other areas as well, adaptability of those skills, of the approach is really crucial.
Yeah, and it's about the transferable skills into the other areas. Into water. We talked before about the rainwater gardens, and we're taking all of our experience in those infrastructure projects and moving them into the other markets. I think definitely, and the team's adaptable to that as well.
It's clearly a really exciting time to be working in the world of ecology and landscape, Jen. So many opportunities, and it's so important, as you've brought to life today, not only for the environment itself, but for how we live our lives and for the way we get around, really clearly making a difference to people. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you, as always, for tuning in. Don't forget, you can stay in touch with us on social media and at our website, which is systra.com/UK or /Ireland. And you can sign up for our newsletter there as well. See you again soon.